camera. You give it, give it, off, give it, off,
Give
down,
it,
down.
give it.
When we're talking about movies that explore the subconscious, it's easy to forget that The Cell came along a full decade before Inception did. And in a lot of ways delivered on some of the promises that Inception didn't quite get around to fulfilling, mostly in the sense that it explored dream worlds as visually bizarre dreamscapes instead of regimented and constructed analogs of the real world. It's a bold and innovative film, especially from a stylistic and visual perspective, but it's not all great, and as such, it's the latest entry into Screen's Hall of Half Good. Now, if it's been a while since you've seen The Cell, you'll recall that it features Jennifer Lopez as psychotherapist Catherine Dean, who's part of an ambitious program that lets her actually enter the mind of her patients using a kind of virtual reality machine. After a serial killer is discovered comatose on his kitchen floor with the whereabouts of his final victim still locked away in his brain, Dean has to enter the mind of a killer in the hopes that she can figure out where the poor girl is before she drowns her in her little dungeon. Of course, nothing quite goes as planned, and FBI agent Vince Vaughn has to follow her into the serial killer's mind himself. Dun dun dun! It's a film that still mostly holds up to a viewing 10 years later, even if a decade's worth of CGI improvements might dull the effect of some of the film's more inventive visual effects. But let's take a look at what's good and what's bad about The Cell. The good, fantastic visuals. To say that The Cell takes advantage of its concept is an understatement. It starts off a bit understated with Dean and a young boy fritzing about in the desert, but when she shifts over to the mind of Carl Strager, the visuals get progressively freakier and more abstract. A lot of them are inspired by famous paintings and art installations, which might be a bit of a weakness if you're already familiar with the source material, but if you're not, the dreamscapes here can border on the edge of uncomfortable to watch. Unfortunately, they rely a bit too heavily on somewhat obvious religious imagery. The dreams work much better when you have no idea what to expect, and especially when Carl Strager's murderous alter ego pops onto the scene.
Where you come from?
The bad, Jennifer Lopez. After hearing stories of how she needs 50 stylists at her beck and call on the set of American Idol, it's easy to forget that Jennifer Lopez once had a simple kind of appeal in movies like Selena and even the wonderfully stupid Anaconda. Looking back, it seems as though The Cell might be some kind of turning point for her. It's almost difficult to watch an actress who held her own against George Clooney in Out of Sight just a couple of years previous being somehow less compelling than Vince Vaughn.
Figured I'd just try to catch him.
Till now.
Yeah.
It's not a bad performance so much as it is just seems a little bit confused and kind of lazy, but she's not helped over much by being written as a milquetoast do-gooder who seems more concerned about helping the poor misunderstood serial killer than helping his last victim. Regardless, after this it was a quick slide down to Angel Eyes Angeli, and it's been hard to take Lopez seriously as an actress ever since this film came out. The good, a bad guy. One way to make a serial killer film effective is to make your serial killer super fucking creepy, and The Cell succeeds, possibly to an extent that actually harms the film. Vincent D'Onofrio as Carl Strager is a dastardly fellow indeed, prone to kidnapping young women, making them think they're being held for ransom, and then drowning them slowly before bleaching their bodies and using them as dolls over which he suspends himself and theoretically does horrible things. He winds up being, if anything, a bit worse in his mental realm as he takes on all the aspects of an actual demon when he hunts down Dean and tortures Vaughn's character. He might not quite be up there with Hannibal Lecter in the annals of film serial killers, but that's no fault of D'Onofrio's, who gives a really good performance. The bad, sympathy for the devil. If anything, The Cell tries to show too much of Strager, which winds up being a bit of a distraction. After Dean enters his mind, she discovers that he has, guess what, a split personality, with the murderous killer dominating a frightened young boy. Her attempts to rescue the innocent kid inside of Strager is noble perhaps, but winds up distracting from the search for Strager's final victim, and is also a bit hard to sympathize with after seeing the brutal acts that he undertakes early in the film. It's also somewhat undramatic, especially in a mostly tension-free final battle with Strager's demonic side. The film would have been better off losing the idea that Strager had any redeemable qualities and simply keeping his mental world as a hellish nightmare. In conclusion, The Cell mostly holds up if you want to watch it today, with some good performances from D'Onofrio and Vaughn and some really imaginative direction from Tarsem Singh, who may be able to actually call himself a visionary director and not have the phrase sound stupid. Emotionally, it's not quite as satisfying as it wants to be though, and it's hard not to feel that maybe a different lead actress would have made a bit of a difference in getting over that hump. It's still an intriguing film though, and well worth a watch if you haven't seen it before. It's probably better than half good, but isn't quite excellent enough to be considered a classic. And that's all the time we have here today on Screen.com's Half Good, but rest assured we will be back very, very soon to talk about another movie that is both good and bad. We'll see you soon.